Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where we are all learning together and practicing together piecing out, or how to peace out, right? I don't think there's a button. There's not a formula. That's kind of cool, though. Wouldn't it be kind of boring if there was a formula and we could just plug it in and everything would be perfect? Then we would probably complain about that because it's the same all the time, right? But each situation is so different. So each thing that we deal with every day is so different. So we have to do something different every day. We have to learn to trust God more every single day, right? And when we do that, then we get to that place where it's easier to peace out, or it should be getting easier to peace out, because His peace does not change, but our situations do. The traffic in my mind changes every second. It's a crazy place up there, right? But it's a constant coming back and saying, He's still my peace. Even when all this is crazy, He's still got me covered. And it's going back to that all day long, every single day, and knowing that He's walking through this life, good or bad, horrible, great, all those things. He never checks out and He never walks away. Yesterday, we talked about John the Revelator and how he had every right to just go sit under a tree and cry, right? Curl up in a fetal position and say, you know what, this is not worth it anymore. Forget it. And so that made me think about some of my other Bible heroes. So yesterday, that's kind of what I meditated on. I usually have one little theme for the day I meditate on. I don't do it on purpose. I don't say this is my intention. It just happens because the brain is busy, right? So I was thinking about some other characters throughout the Bible that they could have given up too. They could have said, I know we wouldn't have blamed Him. We just wouldn't have known about it because He wouldn't have had the vision of revelation and Jesus through time, right? But no, we wouldn't have blamed Him. Nobody would have blamed Him if He had just said, oh, this is tired. I'm tired. I'm just tired. I've been beat. I've been burned at the stake. I've been tarred and feathered, and now I've been exiled. I'm all by myself. This is not the life I planned. This is not the way I thought I was going to spend retirement. He could have thought all those things, but He didn't. He said it was the Lord's day, and He was worshiping right there in the worst circumstances anybody could wish on anybody. So I started thinking of some of the different characters and how they responded. And so this morning in my studies, I just went back to Daniel, because Daniel and the lion's den, we learned this story as a kid. And I was like, wait a minute. There was a time limit on the edict sent out by the king, right? Now we know that Daniel was upright. We also know that he had a relationship with God, and all through, we're only in chapter 6, but he's already explained visions. He's already had the wisdom of God. He saved all of the astrologers' lives because he told Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Let's see, is that the main thing? He's already showed us a pattern of, I need an answer. I'm going to God to get it. We need to follow that pattern. I'm going to look at that after I get done with this. That's what I'm going to get my second cup of coffee. I'm going to sit down and look at his pattern, because and Nehemiah was kind of the same way. He always went back to prayer, right? And so Daniel was like that. We have a pattern here of him desiring God and communicating with God and hearing from God, right? He knew how to interpret visions. In chapter 1, he decided he was not going to defile himself. Kill me, but I'm not eating your junk food. What did you think are the delicacies of the king? He's like, I'm not going to eat it. And so, he made these choices that could have cost him his life. And yet it says that God gave him and the 3 other Hebrew children, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, He gave them, I know you know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but I'd rather use their Jewish names than their pagan names, right? Anyway, God gave them wisdom in learning. What? Where was that when I was in school? But He gave them wisdom and learning, and they were able to understand and learn and gain knowledge, just knowledge in the world and wisdom. It's just an amazing story when you think about it. So Daniel has a track record, right, of talking to God and getting answers, and trusting God in adverse circumstances, because he's already a servant. He's already a slave. He was just picked to be in the king's palace, and here he is. And the others are jealous because he's actually an administrator in the land, yet he was one of the captives from Judah, right? And that was their big thing, was he's just I have both hands, just a captive from Judah, right? He's just a captive, but he's in charge with them, and sometimes in charge over them. And so they got jealous. Boy, we talk about that a lot though, right? They got jealous, and they're like, We got to find a way. And they could not find a fault. They couldn't find something to reach out there and condemn him for. What a dude, right? Come on, Daniel. And so they decided, they created this crafty plot, and they go to the king and they're like, make this edict, make this decree that nobody can pray to anybody but you, which appealed to the king's pride. So now we got jealousy and we got pride. What was that in James? Where there's pride and jealousy and there's every evil work, right? I have to go back and look at that scripture in James, but they're jealous. The king's, oh yeah, I like this. Yes, let's do this, right? Because he was all stuck in pride, right? And so they said, for 30 days, nobody can pray or ask anybody for anything but you. And anybody who does goes to the lion's den. 30 days. This was not a lifetime, continuous thing. 30 days. It had a time limit. Daniel could have very easily said, I can pray quietly for 30 days and stayed in the corner. He could have said, it's only 30 days. I just won't pray for 30 days. And we would not even have this story because it was only 30 days. But no, it says that when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he just heard about the law. Don't do what you're doing anymore. It says when he learned the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. Oh, that almost gives me a little chill, but it just gets me all excited because I'm like, he did not cave. He had some spiritual grit there where he said, I don't care what the king says. I'm just going to talk to God, and I'm going to talk to him 3 times a day. I'm not going to change my patterns, my spiritual patterns, my maybe for us it would be studying our scriptures or studying a devotional and praying or maybe praise and worship or something like that. But it went every day. It says as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. And then I have to think about this flip side of it. First off, he didn't change. That's the main thing. He had spiritual grit. I love that. That's the key. That's what I want to talk about, right? Today. That's what I want to point out. But he gave thanks to God. For what? For what? Because we look at the story and go, he was taken as a young man from his family. He was made able to have children or a wife or a family of his own. What you got to be thankful for, Daniel? You're a slave in a foreign land. You are the recipient of the punishment of generations of those who didn't obey God, and yet you're choosing to thank God. You're choosing to pray to God. You're choosing to follow God. You're choosing a relationship with God. Anyway, what spiritual grit? That's all I can say. I don't have a better word for it than that. He's thanking God that God has given him wisdom, that God is providing for him, because he ended up in the palace. He didn't have to, right? He ended up in the palace. He ended up second in line. He ended up in as an administrator and any almost king, everything but king just about, and he had so much influence in the kingdom. He's thanking God that God was still God even in his difficult circumstances. He's thanking God that God still got his back, and he don't know. He's fixing to go to the lion's den. Maybe he does, but he did not change his pattern just because it made somebody else uncomfortable. Think about that. I'm going to say it again because I need to hear it. He didn't change his pattern of prayer just because it made someone else uncomfortable. We got to get that relationship with God first, right? And when we get that relationship with God, what else really matters? Does what somebody else thinks matter? Jealousy's going to rage. Anger's going to rage. Pride is going to be everywhere. The king was prideful. The men were jealous of Daniel. They wouldn't even call him an administrator. They said, that slave you brought from Judah, the slave from Judah, that one. And the king knew who Daniel was. He respected Daniel, and yet he had too much pride to say, oh, let's not do this. Let's not do this. He was like, yeah, that sounds good. Nobody can ask anybody anything but me. And their little jealous fit just took him, fed that pride, and they put Daniel on the on the watch list, basically, right? On the hit list. And then of course, he ended up in the lion's den. But we also know that God delivered Daniel. And that's the part we focus on because that's the part we want to see. But what about this grit? What about this attitude, this heartitude that says, I'm going to serve God anyway? It can't get much worse, right? I'm a slave in a foreign land. I have no capacity to have a family. They probably didn't even have any friends because they might, I don't know. It wasn't a good situation. It wasn't like, oh, wow, this is great. It wasn't some big fancy Ireland that was, Jamaica or something at all. Ireland, we're going to be all cool. Everybody's cool. It's all good. No, it was a difficult circumstance that got worse. And Daniel said, I'm still going to pray. I don't care. I love that. These two guys we looked at just yesterday and today, talk about spiritual grit, right? They're just like, we're going to pray anyway. We're going to develop this relationship with God. And they realized that it was more valuable than life itself. Having a relationship with God was the goal. There's not another goal. And so in their horrible situations, they both said, hey, God, let's talk. So you got something going on. Take a big breath. Because if you're breathing, you got something going on. And it's not about comparing situations. It's not about saying, well, I don't have as bad as Daniel. I don't have as bad as John the Revelator. It don't matter. Whatever's going on in your life now, make that choice to say, you know what? What I want to develop most of all is my relationship with God. What I want to develop most of all is get in this word and learn more about him, get on my knees, talk to him, listen to him, and learn more about him because that's what's going to carry me through the difficulties of life. He didn't let anybody talk him out of that relationship with God, and he didn't let them scare it out of him. He went right back to that window, opened that window, and I guess the thing that stood out to me was he only had 30 days. He could have changed for 30 days, but he did not. He valued that relationship with God above everything, even his own life. The possibility of losing his life was there, but God protected him. I want to have some spiritual grit. I want my story to read that, yeah, she just held on. She just kept going back to God and getting more revelation. She just kept going back to God and God met her in those places because that's what God does. When we set aside everything else and we say, okay, God, I just want you. He says, this is a good deal. I can work with that, right? So give God something to work with today. Shut out the tough stuff. Take a minute and just talk to him. Thank him. So that's what Daniel did. So he thanked God. He was giving thanks to his God, not their God. And that's what made them mad, right? So we're going to thank God today. We're going to have some spiritual grit. And we're just going to keep on reaching for that peace and letting that peace reign in our hearts because it doesn't go anywhere. Even if everything gets bad or everything gets good, God is still the same. So grab your grits and let's go. Peace out today. Have a great day. I'll see you again tomorrow.